Welcome to Justice at Work, Employee Rights and Protections in the Workplace.
Hello and welcome to Justice at Work, real talk from Filippatos, PLLC. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and I am here with Tanvir Rahman from Filippatos Law, where fighting for fairness in the workplace is more than a profession, it's a mission. Each week, we're going to break down the rights you didn't know you had, the systems that are stacked against you, and the legal paths that can set things right. Whether you're facing discrimination, harassment, retaliation, or injustice on the job, we're here to help you understand your power and how to use it. Tanvir, welcome. Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
So we're going to talk about sexual harassment and hostile work environments today. So just for definition standpoint, what qualifies as sexual harassment in the workplace, and how is a hostile work environment defined under the law?
Well, sexual harassment in the workplace, it can mean many different things, right? It could be as sort of the prototypical quid pro quo, which is when your boss says, "Hey, I want you to, kiss me, and I'll give you a raise," right? So something sexual in exchange for some benefit, right? That's sort of the quid pro quo way of thinking about it, sort of the traditional way of thinking about that. But it goes beyond that. It's if you're hearing sexualized comments in the workplace, even if it's not directed towards you, even to other employees, or just general sexualized banter in the workplace, could also be sexual harassment. So it's both the quid pro quo plus also the hostile work environment that would fall under the sexual harassment category. And hostile work environment is essentially because of who you are, to say your gender, your race, or whatnot. There's behavior in the workplace, whether it's comments, whether it's let's say you're a woman and you're at a so-called boys club at work. Everyone's talking about hey, I went out with this girl last night. Stuff that's even things like obviously sexualized, but also even hey, talk about sports too much, right? And I know people like sports, right? But like that's sort of an example, right, of more sort of genderized speaking in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So you feel uncomfortable. I'm not a big sports fan. I'm a woman, right? But but if you feel like that's sort of becoming an issue where hey, the boss is preferring people who like these activities, who like to talk about sports, and that could favor men over women, right? So that could also create an environment where sort of gender is sort of causing you to not be treated in the same way as others. So it's a very broad way of looking at things. But those are some of the examples of a hostile work environment when it's because of who you are. Like again, it could be comments, it could be just the way people behave in the workplace that could feel like you're being targeted because of who you are.
That's interesting. That's an interesting different aspect. And sports is a good example. So if you got a bunch of boys in the workplace and they all chat sports all the time and they get certain things that you don't because you're not interested in that sort of thing, that's something that people wouldn't think about necessarily, I feel like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it could be very subtle, or it could be unintentional, but it could have the effect of discrimination, right? It may be unintentional, but it has the after effect of this person is not getting the same terms and conditions of work. They're not being able to have the FaceTime with the boss, or they're not getting invited to these events, right? And
right.
What's behind it? It may very well be well intentioned, but also if it impacts people differently in the workplace, it could also be discrimination. So you've got to be careful.
Yeah, for sure. That's like I said, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that one, but that's definitely makes sense. So if someone is being harassed at work, how do you recommend they they report it internally? What should their steps be?
Well, I would, as an attorney, I would always say talk to an attorney first, right? That's sort of the golden rule, if you're able to, right? Because you're the employee. The employer's going to have more resources. They're going to have an HR department who's trained on usually doing what's best for the company, not quite the employee at all times. So it's always, I think, a good rule of thumb to try to talk to an attorney first before it escalates, right? Obviously, not everyone can do that. So if you're, or maybe you don't want to do that quite yet, what do you do if you feel like you're being harassed in the workplace? I mean, you should definitely report it. I know that's hard for many people. That this is
Right.
going to risk my job, right? But if it does lead to termination, then that's against the law. It shouldn't, right? So you have to sort of get that on the record, right? Whether I would generally say do it in writing, but you could begin with a conversation with someone. Hey, I feel like not being treated the same way as so and so, or I'm uncomfortable because of this banter that they have in the workplace. Um, just get that out there, get it on the record. It could be face to face, in person. If that's the case, I'd say probably follow up in writing. Just hey, we just discussed this. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I told you how I feel, so there's a record of that happening because employers tend to forget. Oh, no one ever came to me with this complaint, right? So you want to
Right.
try to document that as much as possible, and you want to have examples, right? Of why you feel this way, right? Because if it's then it could be addressed. Then there's actual sort of again examples of what happened, how this caused you to feel this way. So you want to be prepared with examples and either again orally or in writing, and somehow you feel uncomfortable. I feel like I'm being harassed. Might want to use those words, right? If you can't, some of the keywords not required, but like so long as the employer can understand what you're saying, you say enough so that they understand. But saying some of the keywords doesn't hurt. Say harassed or I feel sexualized, things like that, just so that there's no question about what you're saying. You want to make it clear that I'm talking about something that I think is illegal in the workplace that's going on.
So when an employer, when a harassment complaint is filed, what are the legal obligations that employers have?
An employer is supposed to investigate it, take it seriously. Whether it comes to them formally or informally, you also have an obligation as an employee. If you hear a colleague is having a rough time, or you see them being harassed, you have an obligation. Not everyone does it, but you're supposed to report that, right? So
Right.
whether it's directly from the person who feels that way or indirectly as the employer, you got to take it seriously, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
supposed to, right? And launch an investigation. People. When you go to you tell your employer about, you make a complaint to them. It's not confidential. They should understand that because the employer may try to, because they're supposed to investigate it, right? So that means that they need to talk to other people about it. And so, a good employer would try to keep it as, as hush as possible so that it really doesn't spread around the workplace. But just know that it's possible. There's no guarantee that's going to remain confidential, right? So,
Mhm.
so an employer, again, they should do an investigation. Obviously, they shouldn't do any kind of retaliation. I mean, that's a big no-no for an employer. You can't punish a person coming forward. That's pretty clear. But that happens, and that's a lot of our cases. That
Yeah.
happens. So, but an employer is supposed to take it seriously and conduct an investigation, be impartial, and then follow up with the person. Say they must be to say whether someone got disciplined or not, but they can say, look, rest assured that we investigated this. This is not going to happen anymore going
Yeah.
forward as far as
Take
we're.
this seriously. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
if you feel it again, come to us immediately, right? So make them feel they did the right thing to come forward, and that there's not going to be any punishment or repercussions for having spoken out.
So, okay, now let's go past this and say, so if the internal reports don't fix the problem, what are the legal options that are available to the employee?
Right. So you go to HR, it doesn't, it goes nowhere. They come back and try to brush under the rug. What can you do then? Again, you can always reach out to an attorney, and they may give you some more advice, or they may be willing to represent you. You can also, if you don't want to go that route, you can. There's different agencies that you can file a complaint with. The EEOC, the Federal Anti-Discrimination Bureau, or you can lodge a complaint with them. They're supposed to investigate. They're supposed to reach out to the employer. There's a New York State Division of Human Rights as well. So if you go to state route, you can go to federal route. So you have that option in terms of legally. I would recommend to go to an attorney. They will help you, guide you to the right process where they think would be make the most sense for you to go with your issue. But yeah, you have the right, and also similarly, um, there can't be any retaliation for doing that, right? It's also against the law. If an employer, if you find out that someone to the EOC and reported them, they can't punish the employee either. So the employee should understand that they have that protection. But that would be sort of some of their options.
Okay. And what do you think companies should do to create a safer, more respectful workplace before the problems arise?
Yeah, I think I think regular sort of train people. The word training is sort of people just roll their eyes, but
Yeah.
this is boring. I'm just going to click on
Yeah. Oh
something.
God, we got to do this now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But I mean, it doesn't have to be boring. It could be interactive. Regular sort of giving people mock scenarios. I think again, lots of people don't understand that like something even simple as just again talking about a date you had, right, could offend other people in the workplace, right? And so because they might think, oh, unless I'm trying to offend someone, then it can't be offensive. Well, it's not you, it's whoever is receiving what you're saying, right? So you have to be
Right.
wary of that. Understand who's there, how they might feel. So I think regular trainings, again, make them interactive. Sort of give people real life scenarios, ask people questions. What would you do here? What's appropriate? What's not? And I think you don't want to make the workplace you want to have the right balance of, look, this is a social environment as well. We want people to get along, but you can't cross the line, right? And
Right.
so you've got to establish that culture. And I think, and always sort of create an open door policy. Hey, look, if you have any issues, come to us. Here's who we can go to. Sort of established, like, you have these people to go to that if you have concerns, and reinforce, hey, we're very anti-retaliation, that just don't be worried about that. So people aren't afraid of, hey, if I say the wrong thing, that's my job. So I think just establishing that culture is important.
In your career, throughout your career, I'm sure there's been different, ebbs and flows in this industry, in that industry, but with this issue and in this, in your practice, did the Me Too movement make changes to the way sexual harassment cases are handled?
Oh, I think it definitely did. It obviously opened a lot of people's eyes as to what women have experienced in the workplace in different environments. You know, women especially, were less sort of scared about coming forward. It was
Yeah.
you looked as more courageous than sort of maybe prior to that, where you look at as the complainer. Now people understand um, that this was a traumatic incident that you have to go through. So I think just people opening their eyes to that what people have been experiencing, and I think and there's things like consent is obviously a big issue that came out of the Me Too movement. Like, what is consent, right? If you're a supervisor and you're dating a subordinate, could that really be consensual? Like, could this person feel like, hey, I need to do this, or I won't get this promotion, or I won't get this raise? So it's people have, I think, just open their eyes, open their minds about, hey, let's take a step back and let's think about, is what's appropriate here. Could this be seen as coercive, or could it be seen as non-consensual? And I think it's a good thing to talk about it, right? It shouldn't be always so strict that again, no dating in the workplace, but it should be obviously something that people think about, and it's done the right way, and there's no concerns about people feeling that they do certain things, like to boost their careers, or it shouldn't be based on, it should be two separate things, right? It shouldn't be it should be dependent on what you're doing with your colleagues. But so yeah, I think those issues, and there's many others, but I think really open people's eyes to, like, hey, look, this is a serious issue that we really need to be aware of in the workplace.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I mean, I'm not saying I've never dated someone I worked with, but it's kind of like it's like an old adage, right? Like, you just don't do that, because too many problems can come up, too many issues. But, you can't also stop people
Right.
from, dating each other if they want to. How do employers balance that? They can't tell people who not to date, but they can but they probably want to be like, please don't date anybody who works here. You know what I mean? Like, they
Yeah.
like want to say that, but they can't, right?
Yeah, I mean, some companies have policies like, if you're dating someone who's at a different level, a supervisor or subordinate, you have to report that to the
Ah, okay.
company just so that they know. We're not saying don't do it, but it needs to be, we need to understand, because if there's a conflict that comes up, we need to be able to address that, before
Yeah.
it spins out of control. So, again, depending on the kind of company it is, like, if it's, like I'm thinking about, like in a law firm, you're dealing with a partner and an associate. You're very, obviously working very closely with each other, right? And, again, uh, I think if and that could be a very tricky situation, right? That's a direct, like, boss and subordinate situation, right? So,
Sure.
the employer, the firm in that situation, they want to know, hey, look, is this person getting the best assignments because of their, that they're dating so and so, or it's got to
Right.
be known. So just to make sure everyone's playing above board and it's fair, and
Mm-hmm.
people don't feel like other people are getting better treatment because of what they're doing. So, I think you gotta, as an employee, you have to understand your workplace dynamics. How people work together, what are the different issues that come up every day, and so, with that, knowing that, sort of think about how do we want to handle this if it comes up.
Right. Yeah. Transparency. Right. Yeah. What kind of support is available for workers who are navigating the trauma of workplace harassment and hostile work environments?
I mean, I think, look, obviously, you can sort of speak to take the legal route and speak to attorneys who will help you obtain that justice, right? I mean, that's one way people cope with it. Like, I'm going to fight for, what happened to me and get redress in that
Yeah,
way.
for sure.
So you have the legal channels. Again, sort of part of the Me Too movement. There's a lot more of sort of gender advocacy groups that are out there. That sort of provide a place where people can go and get advice, or they can get referrals to other resources, to lawyers, to whatnot. So, that's something that's sort of another resource for people in that situation.
Hmm.
So, it's, obviously it's a tough situation to be in, and it's not easy to navigate, but there are resources out there that you can speak to.
Yeah, definitely. You don't have to go through it alone, right? You can get help,
Yeah.
and whether it's legal or emotional, yeah, definitely important to feel like you've got some support. All right. Well, thanks so much for that, Tanvir. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for listening to Justice at Work, powered by Filippatos PLLC. If you're dealing with workplace discrimination, harassment, retaliation, or if you just want to know your rights, visit filippatoslaw.com to schedule a consultation. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've got a lot of stuff coming your way that'll be really good, tips and advice for people that may be going through something like this. Tanvir, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to
Yeah.
you.
Likewise. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.